The war room was alive with a low hum of activity as the pack gathered, the sharp light illuminating the large table where maps, reports, and data were spread out. Despite the exhaustion from the night's events, the team was sharp, their focus honed by years of practice. Gunner stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding as always. Aeliana and Maelorion sat quietly to the side, their observant gazes taking in every detail. The High Guardian's golden eyes occasionally flicked to the data screens, while Aeliana's hands rested lightly on her lap, her calm exterior betraying nothing of her thoughts. Jewel entered briskly, carrying a tablet with medical updates. She set it down, her voice steady. The detainee is stable, but barely. His vitals are holding, but the damage from the drug's magical tether has left him in critical condition. We've managed to sever the connection thanks to Aeliana and Maelorion, but the aftermath is still wreaking havoc on his system. Eli nodded from her seat, her tablet syncing with the display on the wall. The readings from the site and the medbay confirm the same thing. The drug's enchantment isn't just a weapon, it's a network. Ravina's power is feeding through it, and every thrall connected to it strengthens her control. Maelorion spoke for the first time, his voice measured. This is no mere experiment. It is a deliberate effort to consolidate power, a means to weaken resistance while ensuring loyalty. Gunner nodded grimly. Then we need to figure out how to sever the source. Clara stepped forward, placing a bag of collected evidence on the table. Here's everything we gathered from the site. Most of it is mundane, remnants of gear, traces of the drug. But this... She pulled out a small glowing shard sealed in a containment box. It's some kind of fragment. Eli, you scanned it already. What did you find? Eli pulled up the results. The shard is infused with the same magical signature as the drug, but it's far more concentrated. If I had to guess, it's a piece of something bigger, a core or reservoir of power. Aeliana leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. A focus. If we can locate the main source, we might be able to dismantle her network entirely. Desera crossed her arms, her sniper's precision reflected in her sharp tone. From the rooftop, Ashley and I observed the perimeter. The hostiles were clearly under Ravina's influence. They moved in coordinated patterns but lacked individual will. What stood out was their ability to regroup even after taking significant hits. Ashley nodded. And then there's the Shadow Realm bar. We spotted Rose in the crowd, watching everything. She didn't engage, but it was clear she was interested. Too interested. Darren leaned back in his chair, his trademark smirk softening into a thoughtful expression. Speaking of the cops, they're rattled. I smoothed things over for now, but we can't keep brushing them off. The way things are escalating, we're going to need them on our side, or at least out of our way. Gunner raised an eyebrow. You have a plan? Yeah, Darren straightened, his tone serious. We need to pay them a visit, make our presence known, earn some trust. Right now, we're just the shadowy group swooping in and taking over. If we don't start sharing some intel, at least the basics, they're going to start digging, and that's a headache we don't need. Sophia entered just as Darren finished speaking, her sharp heels clicking against the floor. I agree, she said, her tone crisp. I've already reached out to the precinct to arrange a meeting, but that brings me to my next question. She looked around the room, her gaze piercing. What about Rose? Ashley was the first to speak. She stayed back, but she's watching, and if Rose is watching, she's scheming. Darren smirked faintly. She's always scheming. Question is, what's her angle this time? Sophia folded her arms. She's an unknown factor, which makes her a liability. If she's involved, even peripherally, we need to figure out how to neutralize her, or leverage her. Gunner's expression darkened. Rose doesn't do favors. She only gets involved when there's something in it for her. Then we need to find out what that something is, Sophia said, and fast. Gunner leaned forward, his hands braced on the table. Here's how we move forward. Darren, you and I will handle the meeting with the police. Eli, I want you to work with Aeliana and Maelorion on analysing that shard and anything else we pulled from the site. Clara, organise the evidence and keep digging into anything we might have missed. DeSera, Ashley, keep an eye on the Shadow Realm bar. If Rose makes another move, I want to know about it immediately. Sophia nodded. And the detainee? Jewel, Gunner said, turning to her. Keep him stable. Anything changes, you let us know. As the team nodded and began to disperse, Maelorion's voice cut through the air. This is not just your fight anymore. You've made that abundantly clear tonight. Aeliana glanced at him, her expression softening. And you see now why I've done what I've done. Maelorion inclined his head, his gaze thoughtful. I do, and you've chosen well. Gunner didn't respond, but the faintest flicker of a smile crossed his face as he watched his team file out. For now, they had a plan. And they'd be ready for whatever came next. The war room was nearly empty, the team having dispersed to their respective tasks. Gunner stood at the head of the table, flipping through a stack of reports with a sharp, methodical focus. Sophia lingered by the doorway, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. Gunner, she said, her tone deceptively calm. We need to talk. He didn't look up. We already are. Sophia's heels clicked against the floor as she closed the distance between them. Don't do that. Don't play coy with me. What happened last night, while effective, was reckless. You didn't give me a heads up, and now I've got local police breathing down my neck. Gunner finally looked up, his single blue eye narrowing. We did what needed to be done. If we'd waited for permission, Ravina would have torn that site apart before we got there. Sophia's jaw tightened. That's not the point. The point is I can't clean up your messes if I don't know they're coming. He stepped around the table, his voice low but firm. Like you cleaned up the first detainee. You didn't even know he was gone until I told you. The accusation landed like a slap, and Sophia's composure faltered for a moment. That wasn't me. You know that. Do I? Gunner's voice was sharp now, his frustration bubbling to the surface. You're the head of Homeland Security. If someone's walking around impersonating your agents, I'd expect you to have it handled. From the far end of the room, Aeliana and Maelorion watched the exchange in silence. Aeliana's expression was a mix of concern and quiet understanding, while Maelorion's golden gaze remained fixed on Gunner and Sophia, his expression unreadable. They're like two storm fronts colliding, Aeliana murmured. Maelorion inclined his head slightly. A necessary storm, but it must not escalate. As Gunner and Sophia's voices rose, Aeliana placed a hand on Maelorion's arm. It's time. Aeliana and Maelorion approached just as Sophia stepped closer to Gunner, her voice sharp with frustration. I'm on your side, Gunner, but I can't defend you if you keep cutting me out. You don't have to defend me, Gunner shot back. We're handling this. And if you're wrong, Sophia demanded, what then? Then we'll deal with it, like we always do. The tension between them was palpable, and it was Maelorion who broke it. Enough. Both Gunner and Sophia turned to face him, their expressions a mix of surprise and wariness. Maelorion's golden eyes were steady as he stepped forward, his towering presence commanding the room. Aeliana has spoken of your mutual goal to protect this realm, Maelorion said, his voice calm but firm. Yet here you stand, bickering like adversaries. Sophia raised an eyebrow, her gaze flicking to Aeliana. Who is this? Gunner stepped in, his voice steady but tinged with an edge of defiance. Maelorion, chairman of the High Council of Guardians and the newly appointed Guardian overseeing Earth. Sophia blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Guardian? Appointed by the Council to ensure the balance of this realm, Maelorion said, his tone leaving no room for argument. What I have witnessed confirms that Aeliana's involvement with Echo Division is not only justified but vital. Sophia recovered quickly, her tone measured. And what exactly does this mean for my operations? It means, Aeliana said, stepping forward, that we work together. The stakes are bigger than any one faction, Sophia. Maelorion nodded. The events of last night are a mere prelude. If Ravina's influence is allowed to grow unchecked, it will threaten not only this realm, but the balance of all realms. Cooperation is no longer optional. It is imperative. Sophia let out a slow breath, her gaze shifting between Gunner, Aeliana, and Maelorion. "All right," she said finally. "You've made your point. But if we're going to do this, I need full transparency. No more surprises." "Agreed," Gunner said, his tone softening slightly. "But that goes both ways." Sophia nodded, her expression easing into something closer to her usual composed self. "Then let's get to work." The local police headquarters was a stark contrast to the sleek fortified workshop Echo Division called home. The building was older, its walls adorned with faded posters and commendations. Officers moved briskly through the halls, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and wariness as they caught sight of Sophia, Gunner, and Darren. Sophia led the way with practiced confidence, her sharp heels clicking against the tile floor. Gunner followed closely, his cybernetic arm hidden beneath a long-sleeved tactical jacket. Darren trailed behind, hands in his pockets, his casual demeanour masking the sharp awareness in his dark eyes. As they approached the captain's office, Sophia glanced over her shoulder. "Captain Rourke is old school, but he's sharp. We served together in Grand Rapids before I moved to Homeland." "Good," Gunner said, his tone neutral. "We'll need someone sharp for what's coming." And Sophia nodded and knocked once before pushing the door open. "Captain Rourke!" Captain Rourke looked up from his desk, his grizzled features lighting up with a mix of surprise and recognition. "Sophia Monroe. Now there's a face I haven't seen in years." Sophia smiled, a rare softness in her usually sharp expression. "Still putting out fires, Rourke?" "More like trying to keep the house from burning down," he said, standing and extending a hand. "What brings you here?" She shook his hand firmly. "This is bigger than a house fire, Rourke. I want to introduce you to someone." She gestured toward Gunner. "This is Gunner, leader of Echo Division." Rourke's handshake was firm as he sized up Gunner. "Echo Division, huh? Heard about you. Operate in the shadows. Off the books." Gunner met his gaze evenly. "We operate where we're needed." "And I'm guessing that means you're needed here," Rourke said, his tone neutral but curious. "It does," Sophia said, stepping in. "We're here to formalize a line of communication. The events you've been dealing with, the disturbances, the escalating violence, they're tied to something much bigger." Before Rourke could respond, Darren leaned casually against the doorframe, his signature smirk in place. "Which is where I come in." Rourke raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" "Darren," he said, extending a hand. "Think of me as your point of contact, the guy who'll keep things running smooth between your department and ours." Rourke shook his hand, his grip firm but skeptical. "You don't strike me as the government type." "Good," Darren said, his smirk widening, "because I'm not. But I know how to get things done, and I've got a knack for making friends in high places and keeping them." Rourke snorted, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "Fair enough. So, you're the liaison?" "That's the idea," Gunner said, his voice steady. "Darren has the experience and the instincts for this kind of work. He'll make sure you're looped in when it matters, and that you don't get more attention than you want." Rourke nodded slowly. "All right, I'll give it a shot. But if this goes sideways—" "It won't," Darren said confidently. "Trust me." Sophia placed a folder on Rourke's desk. "This has the basics: contacts, procedures, and a non-disclosure agreement for your key personnel. We're not asking for full transparency, but we do need your cooperation." Rourke flipped through the folder, his brow furrowing. "You're asking a lot." "And we're offering a lot," Gunner said. "Your officers are already stretched thin. We can take the weight off their shoulders, but only if we're on the same page." Rourke leaned back in his chair, studying the three of them. "All right, I'll play ball, for now. But don't think I'll just roll over if I don't like what I see." "Wouldn't expect anything less," Gunner said, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. As they left the captain's office, Darren shot a sidelong glance at Gunner. "So, I'm the liaison now?" "You're the best man for the job," Gunner said simply. Darren grinned. "You're not just saying that because I'm charming, are you?" Sophia rolled her eyes. "Try not to charm Rourke too much. He's not the type to fall for it." "Noted," Darren said with a mock salute. "But just so you know, Keebler's gonna owe me for this one." Gunner chuckled softly as they made their way out of the station, the weight of the next step settling over them. The door to Gunner's office closed with a soft click, leaving Maelorion and Aeliana in the quiet, utilitarian space. The room reflected its owner, straightforward, purposeful, with no excess to distract from its function. A single desk stood in the centre, its surface bearing neatly arranged reports and maps. A shelf on one wall held a collection of worn books and ammunition cases, and a faint smell of oil and leather lingered in the air. Maelorion paced forward, his steps deliberate as his gaze swept the room. "Fitting," he murmured, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Every piece, every detail, practical, efficient, nothing wasted." Aeliana watched him with a small smile, her arms folded loosely. "It suits him." Maelorion turned, his golden eyes flicking to her briefly before he reached up and unfastened the tactical vest he wore. The unfamiliar material slid off his shoulders, and he held it at arm's length, inspecting it with a mix of intrigue and mild disdain. "Such crude craftsmanship," he said, turning it over to examine the straps and fastenings. "And yet, effective." He ran a hand along the fabric, noting its reinforced stitching. "Every piece serves a purpose. No ornamentation, no flourishes. It's almost artful in its simplicity." Aeliana leaned back against the wall, bemused. "A far cry from the ceremonial armour of Alfheim, isn't it?" Indeed. Maelorion placed the vest on Gunner's desk with care, his fingers brushing one of the pouches. "Mortal ingenuity continues to surprise me. They craft weapons and tools not with magic, but with necessity. And somehow, they thrive." He moved to remove the lightweight body armour beneath the vest, his movements unhurried. As he set it aside, he glanced at Aeliana. Much like their leader. Efficient, direct, relentless. Her expression softened, but she said nothing, allowing the silence to settle between them. Maelorion seemed content to let it linger as he turned his attention back to the desk, his sharp gaze taking in the maps and notes spread across its surface. "I must admit," Maelorion said after a long pause, "when I agreed to oversee this realm, I expected chaos. A fractured world, plagued by its own recklessness." He picked up a handwritten note from the desk, scanning the neat, purposeful script. "But what I've seen these past days, it's far more than that. These mortals, this pack, they are unlike any force I've encountered in centuries." He set the note down, turning to face Aeliana fully. "Their bond, their resolve, it is extraordinary, and it is born not of power or privilege, but of their fragility." Aeliana tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her violet eyes. "Fragility?" Maelorion nodded, his expression thoughtful. "They burn brightly because their time is fleeting. They fight as if every moment matters because, to them, it does. Their mortality drives them, pushes them to achieve what we, in our endless years, might hesitate to even attempt." Aeliana's smile was faint but genuine. "That's why I stayed. They remind me what it means to sacrifice, to live." Maelorion's gaze lingered on her for a moment before his tone shifted, becoming quieter. "And then, there is their leader." Aeliana straightened slightly, her calm mask slipping just enough to betray a hint of unease. "What about him?" He took a step closer, his golden eyes searching hers. "I've seen the way you look at him, Aeliana, and the way he looks at you." Her breath hitched, but she recovered quickly, her tone carefully measured. "He's inspiring, driven. It's impossible not to admire that." "Admiration," Maelorion said softly, a knowing edge to his voice. Is that all it is? Aeliana's gaze dropped, her hands clasping tightly in front of her. It doesn't matter. My duty is to the balance, to Alfheim, to the Guardians. Anything beyond that, it's impossible. Maelorion stepped closer, his voice a blend of understanding and quiet challenge. And yet, you've already crossed that line. You've taught Clara our ways. You've opened portals, shared knowledge, and stood beside these mortals in battle. You've interfered, not out of selfishness, but because you believed it was necessary. He gestured toward the tactical gear on the desk. You've donned their armor, shared their fight. What is balance if it ignores the reality before us? Aeliana's shoulders tensed, her thoughts swirling. It's different, she said quietly. I can justify helping them, guiding them, but anything more, it would tip the balance. Maelorion's expression softened. Balance is not a rigid line, Aeliana. It is a shifting tide, and sometimes maintaining it requires us to embrace change. He stepped back, his tone gentler now. Feelings like this, Aeliana? They are rare, even for us. The question isn't whether you should feel them, but whether you can afford to ignore them. He turned toward the window, where the first rays of dawn painted the horizon with soft golds and pinks. You've chosen well, Aeliana. In your allies, in your fight, and in him. Aeliana's breath caught, but before she could respond, Maelorion moved toward the door. Whatever choice you make, know that I see the strength in it, and I see the strength in him. He opened the door but paused, glancing back at her with a faint smile. Perhaps it's time we learned from mortals, rather than standing apart. With that, he stepped out, leaving Aeliana alone in the quiet office. She turned to the desk, her fingers brushing the tactical vest Maelorion had set down. Her thoughts lingered on his words, and on Gunner, as the first light of morning crept into the room.
All right, you've made it this far. That means either you like what you're seeing, or you're lost. Either way, no harm in sticking around, right? Go on, hit that subscribe button, join the team, and while you're at it, hit like, because, let's be honest, you're already invested. And the bell? That's for you if you don't want to miss any of the action. You wouldn't want me to come find you. See you soon, and remember, once you're in, you're family.